Great, thank you, Sean. So hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Caesar 2, what is new in version 15. As Sean has said, my name is Chris Bradshaw. I am the product owner for piping analysis here at Hexagon. So, of course, today's webinar topic is Caesar 2 version 15, and I imagine that most of you watching here, you probably have two main questions as to the Caesar 2 version 15. The first one I'm going to answer is, when am I going to get hold of Caesar 2 version 15? When will that be available to me? Well, for you guys as the users, let you know, so you're aware that we have completely finished Caesar 2 version 15. Software development is complete. We've done our development, we've done all of the testing, the hardening phase and everything. It's completely done, and we handed that over to in our internal Hexagon process to something we call release to manufacture, or RTM, and that was done on August the 12th, so just a few weeks ago. And with that, our software delivery department, they have to do all their processes and so forth, export compliance, all those kinds of things, before making it available to you guys, the users. So that process is underway, and we expect it to be available to you within, we're talking a few weeks. So we are imminent. I don't have an exact date as to when it's available. The process is, let me say, it's out of our hands now. It's done. We're just waiting for the finalization. So, you know, definitely within September. So we're talking a few weeks before it will be made available to you. So very, very soon. And as for the second question that I would imagine you are asking is, well, what am I going to get with Caesar 2 version 15? What is included? What's new? So we have, and I'll go through these obviously in more detail during the presentation, but we have the piping code updates that we've implemented, the implementation of what I'm calling the piping adjacent codes, and that term, if it doesn't make sense right now, it should make sense by the end of the presentation. We've updated the, as I say, the piping adjacent codes. Building code updates. We have updates to the building codes for the environmental loadings. We undertook a project for the multiple editions of piping codes. We did some refactoring there. Obviously, I'm not going to go into depth on what we did there, but just a brief overview of how that will affect you as the users. And then we introduced a new feature which we're calling report booklets. So I'll go through these in a little more depth over the next few slides during this presentation. Okay, so let's start with the piping code updates. We have a number of piping code updates included in Caesar 2 version 15, and to the most commonly used piping codes as well. So this includes B313, the 2024 edition that was released early this year. I think the official date is December the 27th. It was released, but by the time we got hold of it, it was it's early January. But we've implemented the updates to B313 2024. Also B311, the 24 edition has been implemented. And we implemented also B312, the hydrogen piping code, the 23 edition, the latest edition of that piping code. So this was a new code that was introduced in version 14 of Caesar 2. We implemented the 2019, which was the latest at the time. Since we released version 14 of Caesar 2, 23 edition was released of B312, so we implemented that update to both the industrial piping and the pipeline section of that code. There were some material updates for B31.8, and we implemented the these are what I'm calling the piping adjacent codes. So that's B31J, the updated 2023 edition of that for stress intensification and flexibility factors. B31G, the remaining strength of corroded pipelines standard, the latest 23 edition of that. And the building code, the IBC 2024, was also implemented for the, as I say, environmental loadings. So let's talk in a little more detail on those. Let's start with the three piping codes, B31.3, 1 and 12, that were implemented. So for B31.3 2024, both the main body and also Chapter 9, the high pressure piping portion of this, well, the changes in the code itself didn't have any impact in the calculation side of things. So there were no changes to any of the equations and so forth within B31.3 2024 on the CESA 2 side of things compared to the previous edition, the 22 edition. But we did implement this, and it involved updates to the configuration, the load case templates, and the report templates. So they've been updated. And there were also a number of material changes. So for the main body, there were 53 materials with updated expansion coefficients, and just over 106 materials have been updated for the Poisson's ratio and or the density according to ASME section 2. And for the high pressure piping, there were also 51 material records that have been created, new records with allowable stress values, and updated 14 materials expansion coefficient. So quite a lot of work there and material updates. And we have also updated the documentation, both the V&V manual and our Appendix S examples that we run. They have also been updated in our documentation. Now, B31.1, well, similar to B31.3, the 31.1 24 edition, there were no changes to the calculation side of things, but once again, we did have to implement or make changes to the configuration file, the load case templates, and the output report templates that were needed to ensure that everything was reading correctly and so on, showing the correct additions, etc. And for the hydrogen piping code, B31.12, we made some updates for both the industrial piping, or the IP section, and the pipeline section, the PL section. The main changes were in the IP section, and IP now refers to B31.3, so there were a number of calculation updates. As you can see here, this is chapter IP6, the flexibility and support chapter, and actually this is the entirety of that chapter, this little screenshot. And as you can see, analysis of displacement loads and sustain loads all refers to B31.3, as you can see in paragraphs IP 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, with a little sentence or end of the sentence, except that the allowable, etc., etc. So for displacement loads, as you can see, analysis of displacement loads shall be in accordance with B31.3, paragraph 319, with that exception at the end, except the allowable should be in accordance with the paragraph from the B31.12 code 210D, which states basically the same. However, notice that there is a slight difference in the displacement cycle end factor. So the only difference there between B31.3 and B31.12 is the allowable, and it's the same for sustain loads. Analysis shall be in accordance with B31.3, para 320, except that the maximum stresses shall be as per IP 2210C, which is shown here on the right-hand side, using the allowables from the mandatory appendix in the B31.12 code. So the change there is all the calculations refer to B31.3. The only difference between 31.3 and 12 is the allowables. And on the PL pipeline side of things, well, there were no changes that affected CESA 2, but a note that I want to point out here is B31J is not mandatory for PL. Of course, it is mandatory for the industrial piping, the IP section, because of course that refers to B31.3. But that's not the case for the pipelines. B31J is not mandatory, but it can still be used via the B31J configuration directive. And there was one additional change for the PL, the pipeline side of things, which was made to match up with the industrial piping section, because the pipeline section isn't explicit in stating this, but we allow this for the user to make the choice. So the stress range factor, the F, is allowed to go up to 1.2 for both the IP industrial piping, which does explicitly state, and also the pipeline section, the PL section. So you can, for both of these, use the stress range factor F allowed up to 1.2 by setting the radio button as shown in the screenshot. Okay, now for the piping adjacent code updates, this is where there were some more involved changes. So the piping adjacent codes, what I'm calling them, so I mean B31J and B31G. So let's take a look at each of those in turn, starting with B31J. Of course, we've implemented that, so that involved some updates to the calculations, and also that will perhaps affect as a user a little more, so a number of configuration variables. And with these new configuration options, we've also updated the T scratchpad interface to account for those. So let's talk a bit more detail on this. So we have 3 new configuration variables. Use the smooth 90-degree bend correction, use sustained stress index correction for D over T greater than 50, and welding and contour T quality. And then there is a change to the existing configuration, apply B31J SIFs and flexibilities. Previously that was a yes and no switch. Now we have a third option, so we have default, yes, set 2017, and yes, set 23. So for select addition, well, I guess the second two are fairly clear, but let me explain them all explicitly anyway. The option default is do as per the piping code release. So for something like B31.3, which mandates B31J, use the addition of B31J that was active at the time of the code release. So for example, B31.3 2022, we would use B31J 2017 edition, because that was the B31J effective at the time of the B31.3 release. B31.3 24 edition, use B31J 23 edition. And for something like EN13480, B31J is used because EN13480 has Annex H and does not mandate B31J. If you set to yes, set 2017, well, that forces B31J to be used and also forces the usage of 2017 edition. And similarly, yes, set 23, those of you probably figured this out, force B31J and always use the 2023 edition, regardless of when the piping code was released. So let's change there to the addition or the apply B31J SIFs and flexibilities switch. But what about the new configuration switches? Okay, well, we have 3 of those, as I said. First one, use the smooth 90-degree bend correction. This is all related to note 3 from B31J, and this actually is a fairly highly requested item. It was something that I've been asked for a number of times personally myself, and I've seen a lot of requests come in for this setting. So the point is, if I activate, here we go, we can see all the images now. So note 3, this is the key part here, so, which states when the bend angle is 90 degrees and the bend thickness is equal to that of the pipe, the flexibility factors may be found from 1.3 over H. Now, table 1.1, as you can see in the image, gives a flexibility factor of 1.65 over H, but note 3 says for 90-degree bends, use 1.3 over H, which is it's a more accurate value for a 90-degree bend. The 1.65 over H is more applicable for larger angle bends, like a 180-degree return bend. 1.3 over H is a better flexibility factor for a 90-degree bend. So We have the use smooth 90-degree bend correction, which will use the 1.3 over h for a 90-degree bend if the factor is set to true. Set the value to false, you use 1.65 over h. Second setting, use the sustained stress index correction for d over t greater than 50. This is note D from B31J 2023, which states, as I said, the second line really is the pertinent part here. When the d over t ratio is greater than 50, the sustained stress or moment factor should be divided by 1.3 minus 0.006 d over t. So set this to true to use that correction factor when d over t is greater than 50. And finally, the one that will probably take a little more explaining, the welding and contour T quality. This is according to note 6 from table 1.1. That's the table you saw a few minutes ago. At least we saw an extract for bends. Of course, it goes on to give the equations for the T's and so forth. But anyway, note 6 is as shows. Sidewall thinning, undulation, and so forth can reduce fatigue life. The sketch 2.1 stress intensification factors are based on components free of defects. Sketch 2.3 stress intensification factors, that's an unreinforced fabricated T, sketch 2.3, may be used as an alternative. And then when sketch 2.1 stress intensification factor are used, divide the factors K and I by 1.26 and use T over T equal to 0.6. So we have three settings as shown here. So default means use the equations directly from table 1.1 without applying any of those note 6 corrections. If you set to verified, we'll then apply the note 6 corrections and divide the factors by 1.26 as per the note. And if you say imperfect T, that is a T that has sidewall thinning, undulations, creases, and so forth. It's an imperfect T, so therefore, as note 6 says, use the stress intensification factors from B31J sketch 2.3, i.e. if you have a welding T, for example, use the intensification factors from the unreinforced fabricated T. So these are all our new configuration settings, and to go along with those, we have updated the T scratch pad as well as the configuration file and obviously all the calculations behind. And we've added these at the top of the dialog box. So under edition, you can choose 2023 or 2017. By the way, if you change the edition, it will change some of the options. So for example, welding and contour T quality, default, verified, or imperfect. Those are different. For 2017, you won't see the imperfect option there. And we also allow you to change on the fly the sustained stress index correction for the scratch pad. So you can see immediately in the scratch pad the effects of changing all of these. Okay, that's everything on B31J. As I said, we also implemented B31G. So B31G is the manual for determining the remaining strength of corroded pipelines. The latest edition is this 23 edition, which we've implemented changes to the calculations, the input and the output were made. So firstly, users can choose the edition. You can select the old 2012 or the new 23 edition. For 2023, there is a new field that has been added called S-flow. It's a parameter that's used to calculate the failure stress at a given floor, failure stress SF. When the failure stress is greater than the hoop stress at the operating pressure, the floor is deemed to be acceptable. And B31G gives a number of definitions of S-flow based upon conditions of the temperature, material, yield, or tensile strength and composition. So you can choose from that drop-down list, S-flow definition. You can select the various ones available from B31G, or you can also add a custom value as well. so we can account for S-flow. And we also added some additional material fields. The UTS at operating and the minimum tensile strength at ambient are new fields. They've been added. And for the yield strength, so they're specified on the minimum yield strength fields. They existed, but we've improved the labels so they're a bit clearer. We've also made some small changes to the labels. What used to be design pressure is now operating pressure. The field that used to be called pits is now labeled as floor depths. And we added a new field for measurement uncertainty, again, as per the standard. And then on the output report has been significantly improved as well. Firstly, of course, the report header shows the addition now that there is a choice of additions to select from. So we show that at the top on the report header. A very useful change is the allowables have been are repeated. They're shown again directly above the final results table. Instead of you having to scroll right up to the top of the report to find what the allowable values were, we print those directly above the results for ease of use. We added a new column to the table for the safety margin, along with the definition of what the safety margin is directly below the table, which is the failure stress divided by the minimum acceptable operating hoop stress, as you can see highlighted. And we print also the overall status of pass or failed. So addition of the new code and significant improvements to the output report have been made for B31G for the effectively fitness for service. Okay, now away from the piping codes, we also have updated the building code, the IBC code, as has been stated. International Building Code IBC, the 2024 edition was implemented. And IBC, in terms of the calculations, refers to ASC 7 for both the wind and the seismic load analyses. And as such, because of that, we didn't require any additional input fields for either wind or seismic. So no additional input fields were needed, but we did make some changes. So as you can see in the screenshot in the top right, 2024 is clearly available to select from the drop-down list in the static load case editor when IBC is selected. We updated the calculations, and the miscellaneous report has the IBC 2024 label has been added if you're using IBC 2024. And on the seismic side of things, again, as stated, the calculations refer to ASC 7. So for the static input in the static seismic wizard, the ASCE 7 entry was changed to read ASC 7/IBC 2024. Same inputs and same calculations there. And we added the 2024 available as an option for in the dynamic analysis, dynamic input for the spectrum generator. 2024 was added for the IBC option there. Okay, now multiple piping code refactoring. Well, what is this? It's probably not so interesting for a user in terms of what we did, but historically, Caesar 2, when it was originally designed, the Caesar 2 software, it wasn't designed to have multiple editions of piping codes. Now, back in, well, you can see from the drop-down list here, around about the time when the 2020 editions of the B31 codes were released, we decided Caesar 2 to implement or to keep the older editions of the piping codes. So you can see, for B31.1 there shown in the list, you can choose from B31.1 2018, 2020, 2022. But Caesar 2 was never designed from the outset to work in this way, so it gets more and more complicated to add in a new edition of a piping code while keeping the existing ones available. It gets more complex, it's more difficult to track because there are so many locations within the code behind where a new code must be referenced. It's not, we don't just have to add to this drop-down list here. So we did some refactoring. Again, it's not so exciting for you as a user what we did, but it was quite a large job that was undertaken. It took us probably about the same as adding a brand new piping code from scratch in terms to do, but it does mean that we can add new piping code additions such as B31.1, B31.3 much quicker. In fact, we did those two in parallel within a couple of sprints, whereas before it would have taken longer than that to do a single piping code update. So it's much easier. But what this means for you as the user, the only thing you're going to see, of course, as well as the piping codes to be updated, what you will see though is the piping code list has been simplified. We now separate those by code and edition. So, you can see in this drop-down list here, you choose B31.3. In one drop-down list, you have the additions in the second drop-down list. So that makes your job from the user somewhat easier to select the piping code. I would suggest this list is a lot easier to read than the second list, the previous list, sorry. And there's a red box in case you couldn't notice the change itself. But the point is, moving forward, our velocity to add the new piping code additions when they get released will be much quicker. Okay, now something report booklets. What are report booklets, you may ask? Well, what we did, we set up the output viewer wizard. So when you're in the output, you're reviewing your reports and you're now ready to generate your final report. Well, we've enabled the saving of every setting in here. So everything you've got selected, every report that you've chosen and added into the list. You can see on the right-hand side. Also, any of the options, do you want to save to Word? Do you want to generate the table of contents and so forth? These are now saved automatically whenever you exit the output viewer module, and when you reopen the output viewer, they're retrieved. It's somewhat difficult to explain using words, so perhaps a video is a little clearer. So I'm going to just quickly run the analysis on this particular job. It's one of the example files for CESAR 2. And then I'm going to build a report. So I want the input echo shown, but I don't want the little dialog box that pops up every time you view the input echo. So I've unchecked the user interaction checkbox. I'm going to add a few reports now here into the list. So let's add I changed my mind, the stresses, not the stress summary report. Restraint loads, your typical reports, restraint loads, and I think one final one, there is a nozzle check in this job as well. Now, I also want to send these to Word, but I've just had a thought, hang on, the node numbering is not great in this model. I've gone through, I've added some intermediate node numbers, intermediate restraints. You can see there 62, 65, just for
Chris, did you drop out?
Everything has been remembered. User interaction is unchecked. Send to Word is still set. All the reports are shown. And now I can hit finish and send this out to Microsoft Word. So I think that is something that, if you've been using CESAR 2, you're trying to build your reports, going back to the input, and then you come back to the output and think, oh, I've got to build the whole thing again. That frustration will now be gone. Everything will be remembered, and it should save quite a lot of time for you as the user. This video will demonstrate the report booklets in Caesar 2 version 15. So first I'll run the analysis from one of the sample jobs, and I'm now going to build up the report that I want to export. I want the input echo, but I don't want the dialog box that pops up when you run the input echo, so I'm going to uncheck the user interaction box. I'm now going to add a few more reports into the list. Perhaps some stress reports, maybe not the stress summary, maybe the stresses report. The restraint summary, and I believe this job has a nozzle check as well, so I'll add the nozzle check report. I also want to send these to Word, but I've just had a realization perhaps the node numbering's not so great. So I'm just going to go and renumber the nodes. So returning back to the input, and I'm just going to do a quick renumber. So we've got 62, 65 and so forth. I'm just going to renumber those so everything increments by 10. It's a nice clean model. And of course rerun the analysis to take effect of that. But notice now that all the reports I selected are retained. I don't have to rebuild the report. The user interaction box and the Word radio button are also still selected. This is where the report booklets can save a lot of time for the user. All I need to do is hit finish. And this probably, there was a lot of enhancements that were made to Caesar 2.15. A number of piping codes, B31J for example, was quite a significant undertaking. But that's not the only thing that you're going to see in the very near future for Caesar 2. So everything you've seen up to now, that is Caesar 2 version 15.0. But we do have Caesar 2 version 15.1 coming quite shortly as well. And Caesar 2 15.1 will include, and this is really the only enhancement that will be in Caesar 2 15.1. So there are no additional features, so no new piping codes or anything like that. It's, let's say, a service pack for Caesar 2, but it will include a large new module called the New Analysis Reviewer. So this is a brand new output viewer. It will include some enhanced capabilities that I'll go through briefly over the next few slides. But it is a new module built completely from scratch on modern architecture, modern development techniques, modern software. So it has superior performance. It's fully 64-bit, for example. It uses completely different technology for generating the Word or the PDF or the Excel output files. So the report generation is significantly updated and enhanced, and it is a lot faster and more stable. You'll be able to export to all the same formats, but with some additional enhancements. And we expect this to be, or it's scheduled for, and I'll cover this a little bit later on, but for the towards the end of this year. So Caesar 2 version 15.1, which will include the New Analysis Reviewer. So what is this New Analysis Reviewer that I keep talking about? Well, this is what it looks like in the screenshot in the top left-hand corner. It's a brand new output viewer to review all the data, tabular and graphically. All of the input data and output data is available to view alongside the graphic in flexible, dockable palettes. So, the example here, this is the relief example from Caesar 2's examples folder. Perhaps it makes more sense to view this one with this vertical split rather than a horizontal split. So that's what I've done. Docked the panel on the right-hand side rather than below the graphics. You can add multiple viewports. You can add as many viewports as you wish. We've got out-of-the-box setups for a single, 2x2 or 1x3 viewports, but you can add as many viewports as required. You can tear off these viewports, keep them on separate monitors, for example. All of the input parameters will be available to view on the screen in a tabular format. The tables are shown in palettes. The tables in the palettes are shown with banded rows for easy reading, just like the static load case editor. And depending on what report, what data you're viewing, the data is shown either by elemental or nodal type of report. Any grouping and filtering is available on the fly, just the same as, again, in the static load case editor. It's the same type of functionality. So drag and drop a column heading to group by that column. I'll hit the filter icon to add filters to that particular column as well. And of course, all the output data will be available. So all the reports for all the load cases will be available for you out of the box. And customization is significantly easier. Within here, you can simply hit the icon shown there highlighted to, on the fly, adjust any of the report data just choose which column you want to view by checking the box. And you can save that as a new report type at any time as well. Just use the green plus button to create a brand new report to save for use in the future, if it's not just an on-the-fly setting that you want to use. And if you hit the Excel button, the quick report that you've just generated can go straight out to Excel. Any modifications that you've done in the panel, sorting, filtering, and so forth, they are retained in the Excel as well. All of that output data, well, you can display this graphically, for example, the stress plots that can be shown. You can plot those graphically. The heat maps are available, or the deflected shape that can be displayed. With the deflected shape, an improvement there is a slider to adjust the deflection scale, so you don't have to guess almost what you have to do now, guess at a number for the scale. You can just use the slider. And one thing that I don't have a slide on that, but this is showing all the output data. All of the input data is available as well, just like you have now in Caesar 2, where you can color the model by plotting part diameter, wall thicknesses, temperature, pressure, everything that you input. That's all available as well as the 3D plot option also. And in terms of the report builder itself, for the final report that you want to send out to Word or Excel, for example, this allows you to build a full report using the report builder. Any of the input parameters, any of the output data can be displayed. Filters can be applied on varying different levels. And the main full report builder also shows a live preview in the center section. And as you can see here, I'm just highlighting here the filter icon. The filters can be done, and it's all done like a hierarchy. So you can filter on individual reports, or you could apply a filter at maybe the displacement level, or even the parent level. You can filter at different levels. You get the live preview shown in the center, as I said, so you can see what your report is going to look like. Something, of course, you don't get in Caesar 2 today. This will be available. And as well as all the results that you have, including the input data, the output data, you can also attach any custom data as well. So any custom documents, any custom images, maybe you've got plots that you want to show, the heat maps, for example, you may want to include those as an image. You can do that. Maybe you want to include the isometrics, for example, you could include that as a PDF file, for example. So it just makes it a lot easier and means that you don't have to manipulate the report outside of Caesar 2. And you have complete control over the styling as well. The styling of the reports, the tables and so forth, you can customize those directly within the report builder. You don't have to, like you do now with Caesar 2, you don't have to go configure a Microsoft Word.dot template. You can just do this directly within the report builder. And that goes for the headers and the footers as well. This is all going to be available for you to do in the output viewer. And then, of course, finally generating the file. the biggest difference that you'll see is the viewer uses a completely different modern technology. Excuse me. Sorry, a completely modern technology to generate the document itself. It does not use the same methods as Caesar 2's legacy output viewer. And what this means is, and as I say, probably the biggest difference you'll see is the improved performance and stability. I've generated files that are starting to push the limits of what Word can handle. I've got jobs that have taken, maybe it takes about 90 seconds for the Caesar 2 to generate. It takes perhaps 10 times that for Microsoft Word to actually open the file. So and these are thousands and thousands of pages that I've created in testing. Obviously, that's probably not a realistic, but we're trying to push here and we're pushing Word, but the actual report generation is very, very quick, and it's also stable. You're not going to see, okay, the second time you generate a report, you're not going to see the error message and have to try again, for example. So all of this, and I know I did this very quickly, but this is Caesar 2 15.1, not 15.0. So what is Caesar 2 15.1? Well, it's scheduled for release around about November this year. So coming up now in the next few weeks, Caesar 2 15.0 will be released. Then later this year, Caesar 2 15.1 will be released, which will include the output viewer, include the new analysis reviewer, as I said. There will be also some bug fixes in Caesar 2 and maybe some performance enhancements. We'll implement those, but the big one, the only feature, shall we say, is the analysis viewer. And as I said, the RTM date, I've kind of repeated myself here actually, but the RTM date is expected to be around November this year, which means that you, the customers, the users, well, you can expect the release by the end of 2025. Maybe that goes into early 2026, depending on how the Christmas period affects our software delivery team, for example. But we're looking at the end of this year for that brand new analysis reviewer. So hopefully that's exciting for you to look forward to. I think I've been using this in testing and so forth, and obviously as we've been developing it, and we've had a lot of customer feedback as well. We've interviewed a number of customers, shown them as we developed. We have got unanimous positive feedback on what we're doing here, so hopefully this is exciting for you. And I will say that you will be able to do so much more, so much quicker with this new analysis reviewer when generating your reports. Okay, now that is almost the end of my presentation. I just have one final poll question to ask, and this is actually a completely separate topic, but this is something that is for the future, and the question is around dynamic analysis using Caesar 2. So Sean, could we have the second poll question, please?
All right, thank you, Chris. Up on your screen now is the question: how often do you perform dynamic analysis using Caesar 2? We'll give everyone just a few moments to vote. Okay, we're just about to wrap up voting. All right, Chris, do we want to share the results of this one?
If that's possible, sure, Sean, yeah, thank you.
All right,
Okay.
as we can see, or go ahead, Chris.
No, I'm just reading as well, but it's kind of what I expected. To be honest with you, I don't think there's any surprise there. Basically, the consensus is Caesar 2 is, or dynamic analysis is done probably, aside from modal analysis, it's not very often done. Rarely, or I only ever do modal analysis is, I think, the consensus here. Those who do dynamic analysis are, let's say, a minority. So it's not anything, I don't think that's a surprise to me, but it is useful, and I think it just backs up, let's say, what our thoughts and considerations as we move forward. So thank you, Sean. Okay, and with that, then I think we can go to the Q&A section.
All right, so there's a couple questions I have right away here, Chris. If I can choose the version of B31J I'm using, how do I know which edition of it is being used in my analysis?
Okay. Sorry, it took me a few seconds to process what you'd asked there. That's a very good point. It is something that I neglected to show in my presentation, but it's quite correct actually. And it was something actually. This was something that we discussed quite heavily when we were determining how to implement this, because there is and it's probably a rare possibility that's going to happen, but it could still potentially happen. So actually a very good question, this. If you have the setting set to default, default means use the B31 release. Now, if you have an older version of B31.3, say B31.3 2022 or 2020, and B31 2024, B31.3 2024 in the same model, then you could actually have the situation where certain Ts, for example, certain Ts use B31.3 2020, and so B31J17, and then vice versa. Some other Ts may use B31.3 2024 and B31J 2023. Sorry, this is quite difficult to explain on the fly, but you may have that situation. So yes, what we do to answer the question, what we do, and it wasn't shown, but in the now then, I think it's the miscellaneous report. I don't think it's the input echo. I think it must be the miscellaneous report. So in the miscellaneous report, in the output, for every single T that's affected by B31J, well, for every T, we do print per T, we print the B31J edition that was used. So in the miscellaneous report, you'll see there'll be a new field there. I forget what exactly it's labeled as, but it says something along the lines of B31J edition 2017 or B31J edition 2024.
All right, I have another one here, Chris. It is, when the new review module is released, is it going to replace the existing output that we are used to using?
Again, that's another interesting question. It's a very good question, and it's something that probably thinking back to my slide set, I guess I didn't make it clear, because I went over it fairly quick. Anyway, let me answer the question rather than speaking to myself. No is the answer to the question. It will not replace the existing output viewer, the output module. That will remain. This new viewer will be supplementary to that, and it will extend the functionality and the capability. I guess I should mention actually, that's just occurred to me as I'm speaking there. In fact, the new output viewer will only be available for a selection of the piping codes. Now then, I'm doing this off the top of my head. So B31.1, B31.3, EN13480. The ASME nuclear code, and there is one other code which I forget which one it is. Anyway, those 5 codes, and time when we release 15.1, obviously this will be covered in more detail as we get closer to release. We will host a webinar closer to the release tab. Anyway, only those selection of, there's 5 piping codes, only those selected code will be utilized with the new output viewer.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Let me just look here. In version 15.1, can we still make custom reports like we can now?
Sorry, could you repeat, Sean? Sorry, I've got these questions on my other screen as well. I was just reading them. Sorry, could you repeat?
In version 15.1, can we still make custom reports like we can now?
Yes, you can. You can make custom reports. It's actually going to be significantly easier to create your custom reports as well. That whole user interface or user experience, as we call it nowadays, the whole experience has been redone from scratch, and it's significantly easier to not just create those custom reports, but to utilize those custom reports as well. It's going to be a lot easier to create them and a lot clearer to use them.
Perfect. Chris, are there any questions here that you wanna choose to answer?
Yeah, I'm just looking right now. Well, there is one here, fairly simple one. When will version 15.1 be made available? Excuse me a second. Sorry. This was potentially entered before I explicitly stated, but it's a pretty easy one. It will be made available. We're expecting it to be towards the back end of this year, back end of 2025. And there is another one I'm reading. Does the new output one, I guess that's the new output viewer, show animation as well? Absolutely, it does. I didn't show that. You're quite correct to ask that. I didn't show that in my quick slide set, but yes, 100% it does show the animation as well. It's not just static. Yes, it's animated. And one here from Pankaj, allow to change the header and footer for reports. Yes, absolutely. You will be able to do that with the new viewer very, very easily. There's an actual section to let you change and save somewhere the header and the footer for the reports, and it will be much easier. You can add images and add various different fields that will be made available. They will be able to be added to the reports. There's quite a lot of questions, Sean, so I'm trying to keep up, but I think people are asking questions as well, and it's scrolling around. So yeah, I'm trying to look through here. Okay, now there's an interesting one. Is there any plan to cover ASME Section 3 NB code for Class 1 piping in CESA 2? Now, this is a very interesting question. I can't fully answer that right now, but what I can say is we as Hexagon, we do have a second piping analysis product called Pipe Stress, which is tailored to the nuclear market. It's been heavily used in the nuclear market on Class 1 piping worldwide, in the US, in France. It's originally from France, so of course the nuclear market is very big in France. So Pipe Stress covers ASME Section 3 NB, the Class 1, sorry, piping in Pipe Stress, including the new edition of ASME Section 3. But aside from that, we have been working on a brand new solver engine as well, and eventually this new solver engine will be used with Caesar 2, and eventually that new solver engine will include Class 1 piping. So I can't definitively say yes to that answer, but we're probably moving that way, should I say. Okay, there's quite a number of questions. I've scrolled quite far down. There's a number of questions there about the audio when I had audio issues. Okay, so I know we're pushing over the hour now, Sean, but there is probably one more question that I guess I can answer because it looks to be fairly straightforward. But the new report viewer, will this include dynamics? The answer to that is not in the first release that you're going to see in version 15.1 of Caesar 2, but as you can probably gather from my loaded question towards the end, the poll question, dynamics is certainly something that we are considering and talking about here at Hexagon. So, Sean, I know there's a load of questions, Sean, that are coming through, but I don't want to take over and I'm mindful of time. Obviously, all the questions that we have not answered as yet, we will follow up and respond to them, of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. As a reminder to all our attendees, the recording will be made available shortly on hexagon.com under our Resources Center, and it will also be sent in 2 to 3 days via the email that you signed up for the webinar with. If you'd like to update your emailing preferences, please visit the Subscription Management Center on our website, which I've included in the chat. And if you're looking for the academic certificate for this session, please email me, and I've left that email also in the chat. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out today's session?
No, I would just like to thank everybody for attending. I guess I can just say one final thing, going back to the Q&A section, sorry. There have been a number of questions and one final one's come in regarding AI. Of course, AI is everywhere. I will give a somewhat vague answer, but I will say to David and the rest who have asked this question that AI is something that we are looking at Hexagon, but I can't give you any more than that right now.
All right, thank you. That will conclude today's webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes, thank you for joining, everyone.